Nisan, and it is our minhag for many years as we approach Yom Tovim to speak not about the weekly parsha but about Inyana D'Yoyma. But today we're not going to talk about Pesach, but rather Birkat HaIlanot. So the Gemara says in Bruches Mem Gimel Amud Beis, and once again in Rosh Hashanah Daf Yud Aleph. Haiman de Nufik B'Yoyim de Nisan v'Choze Ilone Dimelav Levi. Person that leaves his home, he goes out and he sees trees that are blossoming. Spring is here and nature appears in its full glory. And he sees Ilonis Melav Levim Mevorech, needs to say a brocha. And what is the brocha? Shaloichisa ba'olamai klum v'bora boi brias toives v'ilonis toives le'snois behen b'nei ha'odam. And this halacha is brought in the Rambam, Perik Yud, halacha Yud Gimel halachas brachas, Shochan Ochor Achaim, Reish Chavav Sif Aleph. Actually, the entire Simon Reish Chavav is only one Sif, one halacha. There's another Gemara in Brachas Daf Nun Ches. Haroye brias toives ve'ilonis toives mevorach borach shekocholoi ba'olamai. Two different brachas. And they are somewhat seem to be very similar. It is about seeing trees, beautiful trees, trees that are blossoming. But at first glance, one would wonder, Haroye ilonis toivois ve'briois toivois. What bracha does he say? Blessed is HaKadosh Baruch Hu that created such a beautiful world, such a wonderful world. Haroye ilonis melav levim, trees are blossoming and chodesh Nisan. What does he say? V'bora boi brias toives v'ilonis toives. Wouldn't it be natural that one that sees brias toives v'ilonis toives thanks HaKadosh Baruch Hu for creating brias toives v'ilonis toives? That would seem to be the most natural thing in the world. So the nusach brias toives v'ilonis toives, we say when one sees ilonis melav levim, and one actually sees brias toives v'ilonis toives, he says a different formula. Shekochaloi ba'olamoi. Would that seem a bit strange? So the halacha v'aroya brias toives v'ilonis toives mevarech borach shekochaloi ba'olamoi is brought in Reish Chofei Sif Yud. The Rambam put both of these halachas in the very same halacha Perik Yud, halacha Yud Gimel halachas brachas. In Shulchan Aruch is two separate simonim, not only two separate seifim. Reish Chofei has 10 seifim. The caption, the heading of the simon is Birkas Shechiyanu. However, it's not only Birkas Shechiyanu. Sif Yud at least is Baruch Shekochaloi Ba'olamai. But it is similar to Birkas Shechiyanu. So I wonder, Reish Chofei has 10 seifim. And it's all about Birkas Hareiyah. Shechiyanu, Haroya Chaveira Lachas Lo Yishimam is the first seif. And then we have the halachas dealing with Haroya Pri Chodesh. And the Shulchan Aruch says our minig is not to say the bracha Shechiyanu when you see the new fruit, but actually when you partake, when you eat the new fruit. Sif Yud is a similar bracha, Shekochaloi Ba'olamai. So why is the bracha Shaloichisa B'Olamai Klom V'Bora Boi Brias Toives V'Lonis Toives a separate siman? I think if it would be required from me to formulate these halachas, I definitely would put Siman Reish Chavav not as an extra siman, but as Sif Yud Aleph in Siman Reish Chofei. There must be a reason why the Shulchan Aruch put these two halachas into separate simonim, and an entire siman which is dedicated only to one bracha, and that is Shaloichiser Ba'olamai Klum, the bracha that we say when we see trees that are blossoming when spring comes in the days of Nisan. So before going into many details, I want to share with you my fundamental understanding, my fundamental chiddush regarding this bracha. And I think these two brachas are of a totally different nature. So many times I explained various different categories of brachas. Birkas HaMitzvah, Birkas HaNahanan, 1, 2. Birkas HaShevach, Birkas HaDoya, 3-4. Birkas HaTfilah and Birkas HaZecher, 5-6. I won't go over this again. But I think these two brachas are both definitely Birkas HaShevach, but they're different in essence and in nature. Siman Reish Chofei deals with brachas that we say al simchas hare'iyah. There are some things that when you see, your heart overflows with joy, with simcha, with gratitude, with awe. And that is the essence of Birkas Shechiyanu. Haroya Pri Chodosh, Haroya Beged Chodosh. Our minig is like the Shulchan Aruch says, when we eat the fruit and we put on the garment. Chaver Liachas Shloishimam, and he's so happy to see him. The bracha of Ilonis Malavlavim is not about Simchas Hare'iyah. It is a bracha on the renewal of nature. After a cold and harsh winter, after the fall, when all the trees shed not only their fruit, even their leaves, and they look like dead trees, and then suddenly nature bursts out with its full glory, full beauty. Hanitzanim yetzu ba'aretz v'natnu reach, and the buds become flowers, and ultimately they will bear fruit. The bracha is not simchas hariyah. It is thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for this wonderful world. And we say the bracha al chidush habriya, when the nature once again smiles upon us. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu smiles upon us through nature. It is a bracha al chidush habriya, as if. The most similar bracha to the bracha of Shaloch Yiser Boi Lo Meklom V'Bora Boi Brias Toivis Velones Toivis Lanot Bnei Adam is similar to Kiddush Levona. Kiddush Levona, we say Haroya Levona Bechidusho, after the dark nights, and the moon does not give its light, and suddenly the moon is here again, a sliver of the moon. That is when we say Kiddush Levona. So Gimel Shleimim, Zayin Shleimim, but it is Chidush HaLevona. And this is Chidush HaTeva, Chidush HaBriya. And that is why it's two different simonim. It's not of the same essence. Reish Chovhei, all its 10 seifim are about Simchas HaRe'iyah. So I wrote about this in Shas Teshuvas Menches Osher Chelek Gimel Siman Yudal. And Siman Tezvav, I wrote a tshuva, a very short tshuva. Do we say Birkas Alanis on a little bush, a tree that gives passion fruits, passiflora? It's not a very big, majestic, beautiful tree. It looks like a little bush, but nevertheless it's boire pri weights. Does one say Birkas Alanis? My psak was definitely yes. Definitely yes. It's not about the beauty. It's not about Simchas Hare'iyah. It's about nature once again blossoming, and once again sharing its bounty and its abundance with the people. And therefore, this is an extra siman. It's a different essence. So one sug is a brochas mem gimel, the other is a brochas nun ches, reish chovei and reish chovav. And this explains some very fundamental halachas. Do we need to say this bracha the first time we see those blossoming trees? Nishma Sodom says yes, only the first time. Doesn't seem so, because the Shulchan Aruch and Reish Chovav says, if we miss the bracha and there are no longer buds or flowers, but only fruit, we could no longer say the bracha, which seems clearly to indicate, as long as there still are flowers, even though you saw it 10 times, 20 times, many days, you could still say the bracha. And it is only if you missed out till the fruit is already visible and obvious, it is only then that you could no longer say the bracha. The other bracha, Arei Brias Toivis Vilones Toivis, Horim, Yamim, Chaveiroi, all the other berachas Hariyah, Machlokes the Ramo and the Magen Avraham, Siman Reish Chovhei. The Rama says you do not necessarily need to say this bracha is the first time you see. And the book of Rama Sif Kotten Tess says, yes, and he quotes the Smak. It is only the first time you see that you could say the bracha. And the Mishabrura is Choshish L'Mogan Avraham. But that is only Aroya Briyas Toivis Vilonis Toivis. Ilonis Malav Levim, no. So I made it very clear in my Sefer and Shemois regarding Kiddush Levona. I quoted some Gedolim that say, if you want to say Kiddush Levona Motzei Shabbos, you need to be careful. Don't look at the sky, don't look at the heavens, don't see the moon. Because if you see the moon, you need to immediately say Kiddush Levona. And I totally disagreed. But Kiddush Levona is not Simchas HaRe'iyah. Any brocha you say, Simchas HaRe'iyah is only the beginning, is only the first time. Kiddush Levona is Chidush Shel Levona. It's not relevant that you saw it 5 times. What does it make a difference? Halavona adayin mitchadeshet. The same regarding ilanot melav levim. You do not need to say the bracha the first time you see. No, not at all. This is Chidush Halavona and this is Chidush Habriya. Now, many times I apologize. I never said a Chidush that is agreed upon by everyone. The Maharil was asked this very same question, which is a machlokes Rama Magen Avraham. Roya Chaveiro, Roya Pri Chodesh. Do you necessarily need to say the bracha the first time you see those phenomena? And the Maharil says, of course not. And he brings a raya from Roya Ilonis Melav Levim. Doesn't need to say the bracha the first time he sees those trees. Same goes for Brias Toivis, Ilonis Toivis, Pri Chodesh, Chaveiro. So the Maharil compares the two, but according to the Magen Avraham, they're not comparable. Ilonis Malav Levim, you do not need to say the bracha the first time, and Brias Toivis, Pri Chodesh, Beged Chodesh, Chaveiro, you do need to say the first time. So the explanation is as I explained. And to me, this seems to be very, very pushet and very, very fundamental. Mishnah Berurah Sif Kotten Lamed Beis and Simareish Chofei regarding the bracha Roya Brias Toivis and Ilonis Toivis, Lo nahagu levorech. And he quotes the Chayodim. And the Chayodim says, why lo nahagu levorech? Mishnah Berurah Shatzi and Sif Kotten Lamed Gimel explains. Because the Rambam says, it is only if you see something that is outstanding and very specially unique. Mitukono is biyoisa. So the Mishnah Berurah says, it's hard to define what is unique, what is very beautiful. Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. Could we give some halachic definition? What is something which is very special? And therefore, nagu shaloi levorech. But Birkas Elonos, everybody agrees, nahagu levorech. And why is that? As I explained, Birkas Elonos doesn't need to be something very beautiful. It doesn't need to be beautiful at all. And that's why paskin even a little bush. If it has a din of eitz and the pri is pre-awaits, you say the bruch. So various different halachas are so appealing and easy to understand according to the aside that I just try to explain. All the other Birkas Ariyas once in 30 days. You see the same trend. 30 days passed, say the bracha again. Same is regarding any Birkas Ariyah. Horim, Yamim, Pri Chodesh. However, Ilonis Malav Levim, it's not 30 days, once a year, and only once a year. So you saw those buds, those flowers, Shchodesh Nisan. Could you say a bracha again or Shchodesh Iyar? No. And all this is based on what I try to explain. So let's go somewhat into details. The Lashon of the Gemara is Araya, Brias Toivis v'ilonis. No, Ilonis hamelav levim. Does it necessarily need to be a fruit-bearing tree? Mahari Chagas, Chelik Beis Machov Ches, says only a 8 spree. Mishnah Berurah quotes him, Sif Kotten, in the beginning of Siman Reish Chavav. Almost all the Achronim quote the Mahari Chagas, and it's a big chiddush because the Gemara doesn't specify Ilonis hamelav levim, and even trees that don't give fruit that are edible, still the process is the same, the natural process. A bud, a flower, and then the fruit starts to grow. The Rambam doesn't specify that you need Afka Eitzpri, neither does the Tur or the Shulchan Aruch. And when I say Gemura, Rambam, Tur, Shulchan Aruch, it is not only these four most powerful sources of halacha. The Gemara also means Rashi, Toises, Ramban, Rash, Boran. Rambam means Kesef Mishnah, Magad Mishnah, Lechem Mishnah. Tur means Beis Yosef Bach Prish. Shulchan Aruch means Taz and Mogen Avraham. Nobody says this until 450 years ago, Mahari Chagas. So Harav Vosner in two different shuvas, Shevet Elev Chelik Vovsem and Nun Gimel, one shuva, but he has two psukim. I totally agree with psak number one, difficulty agreeing with psak number two. So Rav Vosner Zechet Tzaddik Bracha Paskins, if you said the bracha on a tree that does not bear fruit, you cannot say it again on a fruit-bearing tree. I agree with this psak. Because if you said it on a eight srak, a ilan srak, maybe you were already yoitze, and you can't say the bracha again. Just a few moments ago I explained this once a year and not more. So on one hand, we are machmir keshitas halachas ketanas mari chagis. Kaf Chaim, Mishnah Brura, Kitzur Hanoch, all follow in his footsteps. But it is a big chiddush, because there is no source to base this chiddush on, neither in the Gemara Rishonim, Rambam Noisa Kelev, Tur Noisa Kelev, Shulchan Aruch Noisa Kelev. So on one hand, we are machmir not to say the bracha only on a eitz pri, but on the other hand, if you already said the bracha on a ilan srak, you won't say it again. Psak number two, a person said the bracha without seeing a tree. He cannot say the bracha again, because nowhere do we find that Riyah is ma'akev. I don't understand at all what he says. When a person thinks about a friend, but he didn't actually see him, and he says a shechiyanu, that's a bracha levatola. All he can do is say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Elyon. When a person imagines a pri chodesh, but he didn't see one, he didn't eat one, it's a bracha levatola. The Gemara says, "Hai man benufek beyom denisin v'choze ilono." Mishi yotzeh b'chodesh nisan v'ro'eh ilanot melavlavim. Is there any need to say Ri is Ma'akev? Isn't that the Milta, the Pshita Mamish? All the Birkas Aroya. If you don't see, you can't say a bracha. The only exception would be Aroya and Chanukah Shos Nisim, and we spoke about this Chanukah time. So to me, it's a pashtus. If you said the bracha, Shalachisa b'lo meklim v'bora boi brias toivis v'lonis toivis lahanot behem b'nei adam, without seeing the tree, it's a bracha levatorah, and you definitely could say the bracha once again. Another relevant question many achronim and many gedolim deal with is the Gemara says Mishi yotzeh b'yom nisan. It's also in the Rambam, Tur and Shulchan Aruch. Is it necessarily only Nisan? Or Chazal say Haiman denufik b'yom Nisan, because Nisan is usually the time of spring, the time when the trees burst with a beautiful flower that they give. But why would there be a difference whether it's Nisan or any other time? The most important source and the earliest source is the Ritva. The Ritva clearly says Nisan lav dafka. And the Ritva is both in Rosh Hashanah Yud Aleph and in Brochas Mem Gimel. Nisan doesn't necessarily mean Nisan. But many Gedolim, especially the Mekoborim, the Chidor and Birkas Yosef, Kaf Chaim, Mahari Chagis, same source I quoted before, Chelik Beis Machov Ches, they say Nisan is Nisan and only Nisan. Be'ikar lefi HaKabbalah. But the Mishnah Brura and most other Achronim say, and it's a Ritva. The Ritva is more important than any other source. Rabbi Seinu Rishonim, Nisan lav dafka. Shar Shuvas Yad Yitzchok, Rabbi Avraham Yitzchok Glick, told Shuva Rav. So I'm a descendant of the Yad Yitzchok, and every time I mention his forum, it makes me feel good. He was an amazing Gadol, one of the greatest Gedolim of his age. And he was Rav of a little town in Tolsheva, and he was very, very poor. And he was offered very prestigious positions in the biggest kehelas, and he refused because he wanted the calm and the quiet and the serenity of a little town. He should be able to learn and teach Torah. And whenever I mention the Weiss Yitzchak, I usually tell this story because it's family to me. My mother was the fourth generation, a great-grandchild of the Yad Yitzchak, my late mother, Zechroina Levrach. So as I said, the Yad Yitzchak was an amazing gadol, but he was very poor. And his wife, the Tzedekis, saw how much it pains him that he doesn't have money to print his chidushim. She sold all her jewelry, and she told her husband that a wealthy man passed town, and he insists on anonymity, and he left money for the Rav to print the Sefer. And in the introduction to the Sefer, he thanks that wonderful Matan B'Seisa. He didn't know who his benefactor is. His wife, the Rebbetzin, fell ill, and she died at a young age. And before she passed away, she shared with him who that Nogid was. And he was moved, and he told the story at her Levaya when he was Maspeter. And whenever I tell the story, I say, I wonder, and how come he didn't notice? He never asked her, where's your jewelry? Where's the chain I bought you? Where's the bracelet I bought you? What happened to your jewelry? It never occurred to him. He didn't ask her. So I could explain this. I could answer this question in two different ways. Then I prefer way number two. One, he was such a tzaddik he didn't notice, didn't look at his wife. I don't like that explanation. I think a big tzaddik should look at his wife. A big tzaddik is responsible to make his wife happy. A big tzaddik would notice that his wife isn't wearing jewelry, and he would ask, Sorale, Rivka, Rochale, whoever you are, is anything wrong? Why aren't you wearing your jewelry? So my only explanation would be she was such a tzenua and such a tzedekis that she, out of her own choice, preferred not to wear jewelry. And that is why he didn't notice and he wasn't aware that she sold her jewelry. Anyway, stories are important. So we hear many Sepira tzadikim, but today I told you a story of a tzadikis. Sipurei tzadikot, not only Sipurei tzadikim. So, Shalashuvas Yad Yitzchak, he once again paskins, Chelek Alef Semen Kuf Tzadik Ches, Nisan Lav Davka. And if you skip Nisan, Iyar, still it's before fruit, still you see the flowers on the tree, you still could say the bracha. And he bases his ruling also on Shalashuvas Heishev Moshe Orach Chaim Semaches. Heishev Moshe is a great Yismach Moshe, was one of the greatest Hasidic leaders of his time, and he was also an amazing Gadol B'Yisrael. And this question is twofold. If you just were lazy, you procrastinated, Nisan is past, and now it's Chodesh Iyar, could you say the bracha? But the other side of the question is, in all the southern countries, their spring is Tishrei. When it's summer by us, it is winter by them. When would they say the bracha? Nisan is fall. Nisan, the trees shed whatever they have to offer. Won't they say the bracha at all? So Aloch Alamaisa we paskin. They will say the bracha on Tishrei. But even those that live in the northern part of the world, and they should say the bracha on Nisan, they still could say the bracha even when Nisan is over. However, lachatchila ra'ui lahachmir, and to say Nisan. What would be the nafka mina? If the tree started blossoming, Oda, before Nisan, would we say Zizim Magdim and Mitzvahs as soon as possible? Say the bracha on Oda. My opinion would be no. Because according to the Mekubalim, Nisan is necessarily Nisan that overrides Zizim Magdim and Mitzvahs. To say a bracha al tzad havadai and not get into any sveikis would be more important than Zizim Magdim and Mitzvahs. So even though the process started before Nisan, and you already saw those beautiful trees, and in Israel, many trees, especially the almond trees, are beautiful and full blossom before Nisan, we nevertheless should wait for Nisan to say the bracha, because that is what Chazal say, and according to the Mekabolim, Nisan is only Nisan. Do we say this bracha on Shabbos? So once again, Kaf HaChaim, Al Pi Kabbalah, says Shabbos you can say the bracha for two different reasons. Number one, Chashash Yitlosh. If he's going to approach those trees and enjoy seeing them, he might tear off some flowers to smell them, to enjoy the smell. The other reason, boirer, because when you say the bracha, you're boirer, and it's tzotzis hakadusha metoich hapri, metoich ha'etz. You know, I don't know how to translate nitzotzot shel kedusha, sparks of kedusha. So the Mekabolim speak about the reish pei vav nitzotzis from shviras hakelem cheito demareshon. We're not going to get into complicated Kabbalistic ideas, but there is a concept of nitzotzis. It is not only Birkas Aronis, it is Birkas and a Hanan as well. So the Kaf HaChaim says, boirer. Well, his first reasoning is a halachic one. The other one is totally difficult to say in the realm of halacha. But both seems to be strange. Shin Lamed Vav, we learn a halacha. You are allowed to smell flowers that are mechubel karka, and we're not choishes shem yitlosh. You're not allowed to smell fruit that has a good smell, because fruit that are fitting for eating, for consumption, there is a greater chashash shema yitlosh. So if something that is not edible, not ra'ui la'achila, it's just the fragrance and the smell, there's no chashash shema yitlosh, and you are allowed to smell. But don't smell fruit that is fitting for consumption to be eaten, because then we're choshesh shema yitlosh. And if lahariach mutar, we're not choshesh kal v'chomer, ben beno shel kal v'chomer, that we have nothing to worry about when the person just looks at the tree and he says a bracha. Well, at the stage when you say the bracha, there's no fruit. It's far before the stage in which you could eat anything. And he doesn't even intend to smell. He could say this bracha from 10 meters away. Doesn't even need to come close to the tree. So there definitely won't be a chashash shema yitlosh. Regarding boirer, I don't even know how to deal with this question in halacha. There definitely would be no real concept of boirer. So regarding Hilchas Teiloim, there's a very well-known psak of many gedolim going back hundreds of years. What you cannot see with the naked eye, al pi halacha, doesn't exist. And therefore you don't need to use a magnifying glass to look for worms, insects of any form and shape. I'm not aware that there's any microscope in the world, the most powerful one, that could see sparks of kedusha, and therefore doesn't make sense that there's a chashash boirer. So why is the minig not to say Birkas Aronos and Shabbos? Actually, in some Sephardic communities, they did say Birkas Aronos and Shabbos. But to me, the reason is a practical one, and a very simple practical one. So the reason we don't say Birkas Aronos is mechashash shem yoytze meshus reshus umavi adaladamis b'shus erabim. Because we say this bracha only once a year, people probably won't remember the nusach of the bracha. And an eitz pri is never in the private domain of reshus hayochid. It's not only in the courtyard of the Bismedish. Usually eitz pri are out in the pardesim, in the orchards, not in Rishus HaYochid. So the chashash is people might carry a sitter in order to say the bracha. So in my tshuvas I wrote the same about Kiddush Lavona. Tshuvas and Rashbam, they quote a smag, why don't we say Kiddush Lavona on Shabbos? And I think the reason is a very simple one. Chashash Chilul Shabbos. Because Sira Lavona you need to need the Beis Medrash. Kvar kosav ha-mishnah brura behilchas Rosh Hashanah, that the minig is when Rosh Hashanah is Chali b'Shabbos, we don't say tashlach. Why don't we say tashlach? Because carrying from Rishus HaYochid to Rishus HaRabim, I think the same goes for Kiddush Lavona, and the same goes for Birkas Ilonois. So today we discussed the fundamental gather of Birkas Ilonos and quite a few questions halacha l'maisa that gedolim deal with. And we also mentioned the controversy. Is it only Nisan or any other time? So in my Sefer Minchas Rosh Siches, in the very first Sicha in Chele Gimel, I shared an idea which I think has some appeal. What would be the argument that Nisan is only Nisan? The essence of the brocha is Ilonas Amalav Levim. Why would it make a difference when? Benisan nig'alu, ubenisan asidin lehigol. Chodesh Nisan is the Chodesh of Geula. It is the month in which we all open our eyes and our hearts and look up to the heavens. Rabbeinu Shalom, enough is enough. Please send us Moshiach Tzidkeinu. That's a promise made by Chazal, Benisan nig'alu, benisan asidin lehigol. So the major sugya of Geula is in Sanhedrin Tzadik Zayin Tzadik Ches, and we learn a mamar. Omer Abba be'ein lechu kates megillah zu. There's no more obvious time for kates hayomim than a posuk in Novi Yecheskel Lamed Vav. Va'atem hori Yisrael anfechem titeinu ufrichem tis'ou le'ami Yisrael. And Chazal interpret this posuk as the Novi Yecheskel promising the Geula. And he turns to the mountains of Israel, Horei Yisrael. Please share your bounty, share your fruit. And that fruit is a remez, legeula Olam. So Chazal also say that Geulosen Shel Yisrael Kim'o, stage after stage. Not a metamorphosis, not something super dramatic at once. It'll come in stages. And those are the stages of a tree when it gives new fruit. First little buds, the buds blossom and they become flower. The flower withers away, and out of the dust, out of the withering flower, comes fruit. And that is a remez legeulas Yisrael. And maybe that is why Chazal say it is in the days of Nisan that you need to see those Ilonos Malav Levim and thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shelo chiser ba'olamo klum ve'bara bo brias toives ve'lonas toives le'anod behem b'nei Adam. Od rega adabera, another 3 minutes. Nosach HaBrocha, as we find it in the Gemara, is Haroya brias toives ve'lonas toives. Haroya ilonas malav levim hayoytze b'yamei Nisan. Oimer. Shelo chiser ba'olamo klum ve'bara bo brias toives ve'lonas toives le'snos behem b'nei Adam. There are 3 problems in the nusach of the brocha as it appears in Chazal and in the Rambam. Shelo chiser ba'olamo klum. I think klum is Aramaic. Why would there be one word in a brocha which is Aramaic when brochas fundamentally are Loshen HaKodesh, Loshen Ivri? Some new Sforim, going back 200 and 300 years, Heidenheim, Redelheim, other Choshev Sidurim, have a more modern and more correct nusach according to grammar, according to Dikduk. Shelo chiser ba'olamo davar ve'bara bo brios toivos ve'ilanot tovim, because ilan is a loshen zocher. We say ilan gadol, not ilan gedola. Brios toivos ve'ilonis tovim, not le'snois behem b'nei Adam, which is mashma like zekeli vanvei, noi, beauty, le'anot behem b'nei Adam. So the first to make a change is the B'si Yosef in Shulchan Aruch, Reish Chavot. He does write, Shaloi chiser ba'olamo klum, ve'bora boi brios toivos ve'ilonis toivos, but instead of the Gemara's Loshen Rambam's Loshen le'snois, le'anot behem b'nei Adam. And Rashi and Bruchas actually translates le'snois, le'anot. But it's still changing the formula that we find in Chazal, which is a chiddush. Ilanot tovot. Lechoire ilan is the Lashon Zocher. However, the Ibn Ezra was one of the greatest medactics, he writes, Kol dov she'en baruch chaim, zochreu v'nogveihu. Which is an interesting, like a proverb. Dov she'en baruch chaim, it's not an individual, not an animal, zochreu v'nogveihu, Lashon Zocher v'nakeva. You could either use Lashon Zocher, Lashon Nakeva, there's no kpeid. So that would somewhat resolve what we feel uncomfortable with Ilonei Stoivois. Yes, Ilan Gadol is correct, and Ilonei Stoivois is also correct. Dov Hashem Baruch Chaim, Zochreu v'nogveihu. Doesn't make a difference. How about Klum? We would suggest Ilan, but even Ilan is Loshen Chachomim. It's not found in Torah Nevi'im Ksivim. Torah Nevi'im Ksivim is always Eitz. Ilan is found once, and that is in Sefer Daniel. And Sefer Daniel is Aramaic. Would seem that would be Aramaic. It's Lashon Chachomim, but it's not really Aramaic. Lashon Chachomim could be Lashon Kodesh. Depends on the essence and the way the word sounds. So some Sidurim have a more modern Nusach. But not only in our modern day and age, some of these Sidurim go back 100 and 200 years. שלא חיסר בעולמו דבר וברא בו בריאות טובות ואילנות טובים לענות בהם בני אדם. I am a very conservative person, and I think it is preferable to say the Nusach that we find in Shulchan Aruch, following in the footsteps of the Rambam and the Gemara. שלא חיסר בעולמו כלום ובורא בוי בריאות טובות ואילנות טובות לענות בהם בני האדם. בניסן ניגלו, בניסן עתידין להגיע. קדוש ברוך ישלח לנו משיח צדקנו, במהרו וימינו, אמן. Have a beautiful Chodesh. Chodesh Tov. אגיד Chodesh ולעלמין.